Was the day before the Turtle Brothers turned 5 years old, and Raph was in search of presents. He had always been a procrastinator, but he really overdid it this time. Time was closing in, and he wasn't sure he'd be able to find anything for his brothers. Shopping for gifts was difficult for the turtles. If they were to find anything, it would be used and oftentimes broken and old. But there was plus to sewer scavenging. It was always free. He found a thick packet of a construction of a diesel fuel engine he could give to Donnie. It was waterlogged and written all over, clearly some discarded homework, but it was the best he could do given the circumstances. After more searching, he stumbled upon a toy car lying on the bank of the sewage. He picked it up and took a closer look at it. It was missing a wheel, and the paint was worn away, but he was sure Mikey would find some kind of use for it. Mikey would love this, Raph smiled, and put it into his plastic bag. He still had one more brother to shop for. Shopping for Leo had never been an easy task. Raph didn't spend enough time with Leo to know what he liked. He couldn't think of a single thing that Leo enjoyed. Aimlessly, he trudged through every tunnel looking for something he could give to Leo. Raph found many things, but he couldn't find anything that Leo liked. After hours of searching, Raph could see the sun setting through the slotted grates and returned home, upset he did not find Leo a present. He wrapped the packet and toy car into some newspapers he had stolen through the grate. He thought they looked horrible, but he had no other option. There was no wrapping paper in the sewers. He put the presents into his closet to hide them, just in case either of them went into his room. No one ever went to Raph's room, but better than safe than sorry. He was still worried about Leo. It would be difficult if he had not been able to find anything for them. But since he found something for his brothers, he had to give Leo something too. He sat on the floor, thinking what Leo liked. He went through everything he owned, all of his comic books, action figures, and toys, but he couldn't find anything Leo would like. As he cleaned up, an idea hit him. He dug through his collection of items and found a piece of paper and a box of crayons. After clearing a spot, Raph lay down and started coloring a picture for Leo. He drew the family. He tried as hard as he could find the green to blend in the skin. That was the main way they were told apart. Raph was the dark green. Donnie's skin was olive. Maggie had a more yellow-green skin, and Leo was regular green. Other than the color of the green skin, it is possible to tell them apart. They had their features, but it did take a lot to examine the pic on the way. Beside their voices, you couldn't draw them. As Raph colored away, trying to think being as accurate as he could, Donnie was a few centimeters taller than the rest. Raph recalled that slight gap in his teeth. Leo's head was rounder and his neck was thin. He knew Leo was the second tallest. Mikey had the freckles on the peak of his cheeks, and his shell was rounder, opposed to the oval shape of everyone else. Raph knew his head was far angular than his brother's. He thought he hated to admit it, was the shortest, only by the hair. Then he drew their father beside them. He was taller than them by the much, clothed in his usual robe and staff by his side. His ears were arrogant, as they usually were, at least when they wanted to hear closely. He had his hands around them, as if they were a real family photo. The background was his next concern. He put the crayons away and thought for a moment. He considered drawing the sewer as the background. It was where they lived. But he thought he should do something a little brighter. He picked up a yellow crayon and drew a large sun at the corner. He colored the sky blue, leaving some spots empty for the clouds. Picking up the green crayon, he drew the grass. Satisfied with his masterpiece, he signed his name on the back and wrote "Happy Birthday, Leo" above it. He put it in his closet with the rest of the presents just in time for Leo to run into his room. "Hey, Raph! Dinner is ready!" he announced. Raph smiled and followed Leo out of his room to join his family for dinner. Splinter sat his sons down in the middle of the living room. "Close your eyes," he instructed, holding his hands behind his back. The boys covered their eyes and waited for Splinter's instructions to open them up again. Splinter set a different colored cloth in front of each of them. Leonardo's was blue, Donatello's was purple, Raphael's was red, and Michelangelo's was orange. "Okay, open your eyes now," Splinter smiled as he sat back down. The boys opened their eyes in excitement and looked down below them. "Cloth! Yay!" Mikey stated, no longer as excited as he was before. "No, not just cloth. Ninja masks," Splinter smirked. "Put them on." The boys picked them up and pressed them against their faces, lining the eye holes with their eyes. "Daddy, can you tie mine for me?" Donnie asked, having trouble getting in the perfect knot. A jumbled mess of "me too" came from the other three struggling turtles. Splinter stood up and helped each of them tie their masks. The boys smiled as they feel their new masks. They loved them, and they became their trademark symbols. Leo was now the boy in blue. Donnie was recognized for his purple mask. Raph was known for his red mask, and the orange mask characterized Mikey. They each thanked Splinter with a hug, and then moved on to the exchanging gifts among the others. Leo went first. He gave Mikey a stuffed bear. Donnie got a computer chip, and he gave Raph an action figure. They were obviously found in the sewer. Mikey's bear was missing an eye, and there was a hole on the side. The chip went who knows where or what was on it. It looked like something Donnie would use, and the action figure looked like it had been through more than a superhero himself. But it was the thought that counted. They each thanked Leo for their gifts and moved on to the next exchanger. Donnie went next. He pulled 3 books out from behind his back. All of them came from his lap, and it was obvious they had property of Donatello written on the side. Donnie passed a book on space over to Leo. Since he loves that show so much, he might want to know more about space itself. Mikey got a book of old knock-knock jokes. It was pretty thick, so they figured they'd be hearing those jokes for quite some time. Then Donnie gave Raph a comic book. It was the one that Raph had seen in Donnie's lab earlier and always wanted to read it, but Donnie wouldn't let him have it. Raph smiled when he retrieved the book and wanted to read it right away. Mikey went next. He gave Leo a Captain Ryan picture that looked like it fell from a magazine. He gave Donnie a really big book that had a lot of big words on the front. Mikey couldn't pronounce any of them, so he figured Donnie would love it. Flipping through it, there were some black and white pictures that looked like diagrams with a lot of numbers and arrows. It made Raph's head hurt just looking at it. Mikey looked over at Raph, waiting patiently for his gift. He stood up and left the circle, running off to his room. A minute later, he came out with a small cardboard box in his hands. He placed the box in front of Raph. Inside the box was a small, normal turtle. Raph picked him up and tried to coax him out of his shell. When he came out, he looked up at Raph, expressionless. Raph smiled at the small thing and looked over at Splinter. "Michelangelo found him in the sewers a few days ago. He asked me if he could give it to you for your birthday, so I allowed it." He smiled. "What are you going to name him, Raph?" Mikey asked. Raph looked closely at the turtle. "I'm going to call him Spike." He smiled, seeing him carefully on his shoulder. He was so excited that he almost forgot about the presents he had to give. He pulled out the packet and the toy car behind his back. He became much less proud of his drawing than he was the previous night. No one else had given a homemade gift. Donnie seemed impressed about his fuel packet, and Mikey was already rolling the car around the floor. Leo looked at Raph sadly and tapped him on the shoulder. "Do you have anything for me?" "I made you something. I couldn't find anything for you when I looked around in the sewer." He handed the drawing over to Leo. Leo looked at it and smiled. He loved it. Donnie and Mikey seemed to like it too. as they dropped their new toys and ran behind Leo to get a better look. Raph was suddenly feeling very proud of his gift again. He smiled as his brothers went and lovingly over the drawing. "It seems your homemade gift was a success, Raphael," Splinter spoke softly, also seeing how happy the rest of his sons were. Raph nodded, pulling Spike off his shoulder and sending him gently back into the box. After a little more raving over Raph's artwork, the boys collected their presents and put them away. Splinter was in the kitchen, getting the birthday cake ready with 5 candles. As Raph walked back to the kitchen, he saw Leo standing on the outside of his door, tapping the drawing on the front. Raph smiled as he walked over to Leo. "You really liked it that much?" he asked. "You made it yourself, and that makes it special," Leo smiled back, putting a last piece of tape in the corner. Raph looked at it again. "I just need to make one change." He ran back into his room and grabbed the crayon box. He pulled out the blue, red, purple, and orange. When he got back to Leo's room, he colored the skin where the new masks were in their each respective color. "There, now it's perfect," he smiled. "Yes, perfect." He looked back at Raph. "Now come on, it's time for cake." Leo grabbed Raph's wrist and pulled him to the kitchen.